Hello and welcome to the Clear Crypto podcast, brought to you by StarkWare and Cointelegraph. No jargon, no hype, just straight talk on what crypto and blockchain do today and what they'll do tomorrow. Clear and crypto. If those two little words sound like a contradiction in terms, you're in the right place. Welcome. Maybe you're getting started in this world. We will get you up to speed. And if you're an OG, if you already live and breathe this stuff, don't go anywhere. This is for you too. And I'll tell you why. Because one of our biggest challenges in crypto is how to communicate why it's so great and what it's all about to others without frying their brains. I guarantee you'll be clearer and better at doing this thanks to these conversations. I'm Nathan, a journalist who's fallen into blockchain. In the last episode, we discussed how Bitcoin is more than money, more than tech, and how it's about a vision. Today, we'll be talking to a real-life crypto visionary and asking what's holding back blockchain from mass adoption and how can he change that? That visionary is Ben-Sasson, CEO of the company where I work, StarkWare. And you get a buy one, get one free deal on visionaries today because we're going to be hearing from, via footage from a Twitter Spaces, Vitalik, one of the biggest names in crypto. Gareth, how are you?
I'm really looking forward to this episode today. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, now in today's episode, we actually have two visionaries for the price of one. We're going to be talking to Ben-Sasson, and we're also going to be hearing and seeing footage from a conversation that Ellie was involved in with Vitalik. Vitalik is one of those people in the crypto space, one of those few people who has kind of Madonna status. Only a first name is required. And he is the visionary who came up with the idea for the Ethereum blockchain, which is the second largest. And the conversation that he had with Ellie was actually about Bitcoin, which is a fascinating little twist. Anyway, let's jump into today's episode. Ellie, we would like to put you into a Bitcoin time machine. We'd like to put you forward 5 years and tell us what is going to look different within 5 years of the way that Bitcoin is used compared to today.
So the use of Bitcoin in 5 years will be that, first of all, it is in much more use. It's sort of velocity of Bitcoin. The number of times a Bitcoin is passed around will vastly increase because it will have scale and it will be done on the same security and decentralization principles that Satoshi laid out. That's what's going to happen. So we're all going to be using Bitcoin and there'll be a beautiful, blooming economy based on it.
Ellie, tell us. You're a professor. You spent many years in university, all sorts of research papers that probably very few people read, but were really, really smart.
Oh, you didn't read them?
Not all of them. Not all of them. You know, shouldn't you be in an ivory tower pontificating instead of running a large blockchain infrastructure company? What kind of brought you from there to here?
Well, it's the same feeling that brought me to academia, is the same feeling that drew me over to Bitcoin entrepreneurship. It's like love, inspiration, and values. So I love academia and what it stands for, advancing the horizons of knowledge, going where no one has gone before. That's what drew me in, and I love it. I fell in love with Bitcoin in 2013 with the vibes, the ideology, the promise, the vision. Maybe the biggest reason I'm doing what I do today is love for the team and the people that I get to interact with here at StarkWare. It's such an inspiration and such a privilege to be working with all these gigabrains that also happen to be very nice people.
Yeah, it's fascinating that you say that because Gareth and I actually in the last episode were talking about how people see blockchain and crypto as, you know, it's about investment, it's about technology. But what we find is that each person we speak to actually takes us deeper into that notion that it's a culture. And now I often think of the world of crypto a little bit like an orchestra. And there's many, many players in this orchestra. And the particular section of the orchestra that Ellie is running is the section that deals with scaling, actually enabling blockchain to serve more people. Because as we discussed in the last episode, it's actually an inbuilt feature of blockchains that they do perform slowly. We talked about the reasons for that. You can go back to the last episode, listeners, if you want to find out a little bit about that. So we're going to talk a bit today about this part of the orchestra that Ellie's running, the scaling part of things. And what I want to do is actually grab a short clip from the last episode where Charlie, our guest from then, actually explained quite clearly what scaling is all about.
When I think of scaling Bitcoin, I think of empowering more individuals to access Bitcoin directly without having to go through an intermediary. Fewer people having to go through a Coinbase or a BlackRock, and more people being able to use Bitcoin, the base layer, with no trusted counterparty.
You can always trust Charlie to put it succinctly. So Ellie, you have actually worked this scaling magic on Ethereum, meaning that you've made it possible to fit many, many more transactions on the blockchain at much lower cost. And now you're turning your attentions, your company's turning its attentions, and the chain that you're connected to, StarkNet, everyone turning their attentions to Bitcoin to do the same thing there. Why is that so important?
It's very important because, if you go back to Satoshi's words in the famous white paper, he talks about the need for any two interested parties to interact and transact in a way that is completely trustless. And the sad reality is that today this is not the case on Bitcoin. And the sad reality is today this is not achievable on any truly decentralized blockchain.
So StarkNet is actually the chain that was built using the technology that you actually invented, that Stark cryptographic proofs. And the point of these proofs is actually that they are completely trustworthy. So nobody can add anything to the blockchain that isn't entirely trustworthy. So I guess that means the relevance here is that if you're scaling, you want to do it in the most secure way. And Bitcoiners are always kind of, worried about things being done correctly, things being done in a way that matches the values of the chain. Is that a large part of this attempt to scale Bitcoin, that you want to do it in a very specific way?
Yes. Bitcoin's motto is "in math, we trust." And actually, all of the technology that I co-invented, ZK Starks, and every piece of technology that StarkWare has ever deployed has always been backed by the integrity of math, to the point of even if we would want to violate integrity, the math that I invented would prevent us. And that's exactly the way we scale Ethereum today and plan to scale Bitcoin tomorrow.
Okay, so we'll come back to this scaling effort in a moment. But actually, Ellie, you had a fascinating conversation along with some others on the day that StarkWare and StarkNet announced the actual proposals of how you're going to scale Bitcoin. You had a conversation with Vitalik Buterin, who was the co-founder of Ethereum, major figure within Ethereum. And we're going to see some highlights from that conversation now.
It's kind of more subjective, and there's this balance between basically time and capital efficiency versus how safe the whole thing is, right? I mean, I'm sure that you guys have chosen the parameters pretty conservatively, and so the thing will actually end up running just fine. But it's definitely going to be a really interesting experiments to show. I mean, I think realistically, Bitcoin and Ethereum are probably the two most sturdy and stable systems to actually run this kind of thing on top of. And so, if it succeeds here, then we'll see how that goes from there. And I think, as we've seen, in Bitcoin, it's very similar, right? There's different parts of the protocol that have different levels of perception in the community of how enshrined they are or how unchangeable they are, right? And within Ethereum, these kinds of boring technical changes tend to be fairly easy, or they tend to not really get much community resistance, right? Whereas the things that do get community resistance are some of these much bigger things that have to do with protocol decentralization, right?
Gareth, what do you make of this interesting dynamic that you have co-founder of Ethereum also talking about Bitcoin as well? It's quite interesting, right?
It's really interesting. I mean, for me, it comes full circle. Vitalik was one of the co-founders of Bitcoin magazine all the way back in 2011, so his journey into this
crazy world of blockchain really started with researching and understanding Bitcoin. And for someone who's a big believer in the Bitcoin blockchain and the movement, I find it fascinating that Vitalik does believe that ecosystem participants that have played a massive role in bringing scale to the Ethereum blockchain can do the same for Bitcoin. And, his excitement about that makes you really excited for Bitcoin and the future of bringing scale.
Ellie, what did you feel about that conversation? Because I assume that when you went into talking about scaling Bitcoin, you've been working on Ethereum for years. You weren't sure exactly how people would react. But now it's clear there's this kind of dialogue. And I understand that you are very keen actually on the idea of scaling the two together, actually, in some senses, being the link that connects them.
Yeah, I mean, to me, and I'm sure to Vitalik as well, there is no contradiction between Ethereum and Bitcoin. And I first came to know Vitalik when he was the editor at the Bitcoin magazine. And I came to know him through my work on ZK and his being interested in Bitcoin. And of course, famously, he realized that some things he really wanted could not be done on Bitcoin, which is how Ethereum came about. But it's not surprising to me that Vitalik is very enthusiastic about Bitcoin, and certainly not surprising to see that StarkWare and me that owe so much to Bitcoin and hold it in the greatest respect would love to give back and deploy on it and integrate with it as quickly as we can.
It's interesting, Gareth, that this world is often seen as very tribalist, that it's almost like your blockchain, your crypto is your religion, but you actually see kind of, on the high levels of those who've been involved for many years, actually more dialogue than you'd expect going on.
Yeah, definitely. I've had the pleasure of speaking to a lot of different people involved at the highest levels of different chains. They all are doing very interesting things, and their protocols offer different solutions and different use cases. And for a lot of people to be coming full circle back to Bitcoin and understanding that the base layer of what it does offers something that cannot really be matched other than, like Ellie says, the decentralization of one or two other chains is really important to me. And I find it fascinating that the brightest minds in the space are starting to realize that, hey, we need to help scale Bitcoin, or at least bring smart contract functionality to Bitcoin, because that is going to unlock the true value of that chain. I'm really keen to see how this is going to go in the next year or two.
Ellie, there is an issue we need to address here, which is that there's a lot that can be done to bring usability and scale to Bitcoin as it is. But to actually really knock this out of the park, it's said that it would be good to have some type of code change on Bitcoin to actually make a tweak to the code of Bitcoin in order to enable much, much more functionality. So there are various code changes that are being proposed to enable Bitcoin to do this. We won't get into the details of exactly what they are, but let's take the big topic here, which is that some people within the Bitcoin space are very much traditionalists and say, okay, leave Bitcoin as it is. Don't change it. Doesn't matter so much if it's not actually in day-to-day use, because the important thing is that it continues unchanged. And others are in favor of making some of these changes to make it more usable, making a small tweak to the code. What do you say to those who believe strongly that Bitcoin should not be changed? There should be no alterations to the code, and it should carry on how it is today.
To me, the first answer is that we are failing to meet the standard that Satoshi laid out. We are not in a situation where Bitcoin is a system that today can allow any two parties to transact without any trusted intermediary. We're simply not there. To me, that's the start, middle, and end of the reason why things need to change, right? We need to reach that goal. And I think if Satoshi were still around, he would advocate for that and make sure that we get there. But there are more prosaic reasons. Ultimately, things like the price of Bitcoin, the utility of Bitcoin, they're connected to the value it can offer people. And right now, that value is somewhat limited. It is limited to something like a little bit like a Rolex or a bar of gold. It is something that only the very rich can own in a self-custodial way as intended. And the rest of us can only access it through third parties, large financial institutions. So because of this limited utility and limited usage, you also have relatively limited value to Bitcoin. So compared to the size of the global economy, I mean, Bitcoin today has a $2 trillion market cap. That's really astonishing and well-deserved. But 2 trillion is still very small, and the volume of transactions on Bitcoin is abysmally small compared to the volume of transactions in the economy. We need to get more of the economy working on the same principles that Bitcoin is founded on. And this will also increase, fees and rewards for miners, making the system more secure, bringing more of us in and helping with decentralization. And it will also help the holders of Bitcoin, because I believe this will push Bitcoin's price to even higher heights.
Okay, so you're saying that today Bitcoin actually needs to make those code changes to bring more functionality for everyone's benefit. You gave the example of a Rolex. You said Bitcoin's become a bit of a Rolex, nice to look at, very expensive, beautifully engineered, but it's not doing what it should. Is there a better analogy of what it could be if it's not to be a Rolex? What should it be?
It should be the infrastructure on which our economy is based on, right? When we buy groceries, when we buy a cup of coffee, when we send, remittance and cross-border payments, when we take a loan, buy assets, when companies IPO, these things can and should be built on an infrastructure that is based on Satoshi's core principles, right, of decentralization, security, and involving everyone in its operation and in safeguarding it. It's trivial.
I really wanted to just back up what Ellie was saying. Look, I find it massively refreshing to hear Ellie talk about the real reason for why Bitcoin was invented. I've had fascinating conversations with a lot of really influential developers, entrepreneurs, and cypherpunks in the Bitcoin space. And I think two conversations I've had with Adam Back and Jameson Lopp. And Adam Back has always said to me that he believes Bitcoin is both digital gold because of the fundamentals of how the network works, but it's also electronic money. And a lot of people have become enamored with the idea that Bitcoin is very valuable and it will become more and more valuable over time. And it has become this pet rock. You introduce financial products like Bitcoin ETFs, you bring in a whole lot of money, but then suddenly Bitcoin becomes more of a store of value, and a lot of people forget what the network actually does. It's a payment network. And I think the most important thing here is to remind people that, yes, you can use Bitcoin to pay each other. That's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to allow us to transfer value between ourselves. And a guy like Jameson Lopp will tell you that the Bitcoin community in general has become guilty of being in a rush to ossify the network and keep it in its current state and not change anything because it works as it intended. There's one or two proposals to change the Bitcoin protocol, OpCat. We won't get into the details, but it would essentially unlock some smart contract functionality that would improve the scaling capability of Bitcoin. And my last point is I like to look at someone like Joe Hall, Joe Nakamoto. Some people will know him online by his moniker. And he goes around to different parts of the world, countries that are ravaged by hyperinflation or countries where many people are unbanked. And he goes and looks at Bitcoin circular economies. And in all of these places, people have turned to use Bitcoin for what it was intended. Yes, it's a store of value, which is a beautiful part of what it's supposed to do. But it's also a payments network, and it allows people to transact with each other in a decentralized way, and no one can stop them. And I really want to be a part of that movement going forward. And that is why I really say that at heart, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist, and I find it massively important that people like Vitalik and people like Ellie are coming back to Bitcoin and saying, hey, let's solve the final problem that Bitcoin has. Let's make it the payment network it was supposed to be. It will still be digital gold. It will become infinitely more valuable over time. And that's the way that I see it. And I hope that we're moving in that direction. And I'm really excited to see what happens with these scaling efforts. And I just wanted to add that in. Really, it made me very excited to hear Ellie say what he said, especially because he's a mathematician and he really understands how these things work a lot better than I do.
Ellie, is that basically what you're shooting at, kind of saying, okay, this massive kind of, store of value function of Bitcoin, everybody's noticing it. Washington's noticing it, talking about the crypto reserve. Listeners, if you didn't catch episode 1 with Catherine, the attorney, listen to that. So massive store of value. And you seem to be saying, hey, guys, the whole world is looking at crypto right now, not just store of value. everyone utility as well. Let's talk about utilities. Is that what you're doing right now?
Yes, exactly. Money is several different things. One of them is store of value, but the other one is a medium of exchange. And Bitcoin currently pretty much lacks that, unfortunately. And this needs to be fixed, right? And it can be fixed. We know the way. And the way it's 9 lines of code, right? Enable opcat. Again, we won't go into technical details, but you unlock pretty much unlimited economic activity that can now go on Bitcoin, and you can offer micropayments and all the stuff that Satoshi was after.
So you're saying you could kind of change the financial system by altering 9 lines of code, which is probably a drop in the ocean. Amazing. So it'll be fascinating to see if that actually happens. Okay, we're running out of time. I could talk to the two of you all day. As our viewers and listeners know, I like to set people a little challenge before the end of our episodes. Gareth, one for you, and then Ellie, one for you. Gareth, you were recently back home with probably some of your old friends, some of your friends from your sports radio days who are like, hey, Gareth, what are you doing now? How did you explain that to them in 45 seconds?
I traded in my sports journalism card for a financial journalism card, and I am now spending my time speaking to the most important people in an industry that is transforming the future of finance. And yeah, I'm just trying to create more content, tell more stories, and really advocate for a better financial future and a better system that's going to bring a lot more freedom and equality to people. That's what I'm trying to do.
Very succinct, very succinct. I imagine your sports broadcasting friends were still on the same beer by the time that you'd finished that. So very good. Ellie, your challenge. You've been working away on an article which you call Satoshi's Invention and is going to be published soon or may already be up by the time this episode gets out. And it does something that we don't really do enough in the crypto sphere, which is to look back to say, what is this all about? What are the values? And you talk about 3 different ideas within Bitcoin, which you call broadness, integrity, and verifiability. I want to give you about 45 seconds on each of them. The briefest, most succinct summing up of what you say about each of those in terms that anyone can understand. And we might start waving a little jargon flag because we promise our listeners that there's no jargon. Ellie, how do you sum that up?
Let me first try just to do all of them, and I don't think it will take much more than 45.
Go for it.
Okay, so ask yourself, what is Bitcoin really about? What is the core innovation that Satoshi brought to the world? So everyone views it differently. I want to share with you the way I view it, okay, so that you can decide what you go after and within this world of cryptocurrency, what it is that you value. So what is, in my view, Satoshi's innovation? It is not about cryptography. It's not about computers. It's not about math. It's not about any of that. It's about something that has been around for thousands of years. And these are social constructs. What are social constructs? Things like money. These are systems that have immense value, but all of that value is pegged on something society does. Society needs to have these systems with integrity, and society needs to perceive that integrity and agree that it exists. Like money, right? The pieces of paper mean nothing without society knowing that this system has integrity and knowing that everyone knows it has integrity. So Satoshi innovated a brilliant new way to build social constructs. And there are 3 principles to the way Satoshi did it. Each one of them is mind-blowing, beautiful, and all about freedom of individuals. The first principle is broadness, which means that operating the system is done in a way where all of us are invited to participate. Each and every one of us is invited to participate in operating Bitcoin. This is in complete contrast to the way the traditional financial world works. The second principle is that of incentivized integrity, which means that as we are operating the system, we are being given value in the form of new Bitcoin from fees and from minting. And the reason we're given Bitcoin is so that we know and everyone knows that this whole system has integrity and trusts it. So again, this is very different from the way your bank works. Your bank does not offer you and me any fees, a proportion of the fees or dividends for operating its network so that everyone trusts it. No, we're asked to trust a bunch of good-looking people in suits and blouses. Okay? And the third principle is that of public verifiability, which means that each and every one of us can check on our computers, on simple computers, not on some monster machines, that each and every transaction of Bitcoin from the start and an ongoing basis has been done with integrity, and there's nothing fishy going on there. Again, this is not something that our national currency systems are going to offer us to do. So 3 principles, each one of them all about freedom, empowerment of individuals, and all of them are Satoshi's present to society. It's a new way to base social constructs like money.
There you have it. Blockchain, Bitcoin, not just economics, not just computer science, but very much sociology and the way that society is functioning. And the piece that you're bringing to the table now, Eli, is to do what? Is to
exponentially expanding verifiability, right? So the blockchain already gives you broadness and integrity, incentivized integrity, but it is limited in scale because on our laptops, there's only so many transactions we can verify. The beautiful thing is that with enough math, and that's the math that I'm proud to have been one of the supporters of and have advanced it, you can use your laptop in order to verify the integrity of an exponential amount of computation. On your smartphone, within less than a second, you can verify the integrity of amount of transactions that is all of the world's transactions in a day. So that's the power of math, and that is what StarkWare and StarkNet is delivering in its products.
Okay, and Eli, if people want to pick up this article that you've written, I'm sure that it will be in your X feed. Tell us your X handle.
It is Eli Ben-Sasson in one word, and I hope we can show it here. And my blog is called Integrity Matters, which it does.
And Gareth, if listeners, viewers just cannot wait to the next episode to see you, they can actually hear you talking every single day about crypto. Where can they do that?
Yeah, that's right. Cointelegraph's got a new daily X show that we run 3 o'clock European time, Central European time, 9 o'clock Eastern time if you're in the United States. It's called @Chain Reaction. My co-host is Robert Baggs, and we're live Monday to Friday. So please come and join us. We unpack the biggest news stories of the last 24 hours and have a load of big name guests. I think, Eli, you're going to have to come on and talk about Bitcoin scaling in a week or two.
I'd love that.
Thank you, Eli. Thank you, Gareth. And thank you to everyone who's joined this episode of the Clear Crypto podcast, brought to you by Cointelegraph and StarkWare, getting rid of the jargon, getting rid of the hype, and just talking about what blockchain does today and what it's going to do tomorrow. If you're joining the show here in episode 3 and you want to catch up on the first 2 episodes, highly recommended. And if you're enjoying these episodes, share them with your friends and family, whether they're crypto naive, they know nothing about this space, this is where they're going to find out about it, or if they're crypto native. I think it's kind of key listening for all of us who want to get better at communicating in blockchain, about blockchain. One of my favorite reactions so far to this show is from a friend who recommended it to one of his crypto native buddies, saying, hey, when you talk about crypto, you're boring, but when they do it on this show, it's more interesting. Listen to it and take a leaf out of their book. So lovely reaction there. And on that nutshell, goodbye until next time from the avowedly unboring Clear Crypto podcast.